Hello, shining stars. I'm so glad you came back because I can't wait to find out what happens to our hero, Despero. If you remember from last time, Despero was talking to the thread master and he wanted to get some thread because he's going on a quest. He's going to see if he can save the Princess P. He needs to go through the dungeon and he needs the thread. If you remember, the dungeon is like a maze and he wants to use the thread like a rope, a tiny, tiny little mouse rope, so he doesn't get lost in the maze. So let's find out how he does on his quest as we read chapter 43, What Cook Was Stirring. What could Cook be making? Let's read and find out. That night, Despero rolled the thread from the threadmaster's lair along innumerable hallways and down 3 flights of stairs. Reader, allow me to put this in perspective for you. Your average house mouse, or castle mouse if you will, weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 ounces. That might be like a cookie, the size of a cookie or something. Despero, as you well know, was in no way average. In fact, he was so incredibly small that he weighed about half what your average mouse weighs. So let's do some math. Most mice weigh 4 ounces and he weighed half of that. So I've got to put half of my fingers down. Boop. What's half of 4? 2. He only weighed 2 ounces. That is all. Just a tiny, like a half a cookie. Think about it. He was nothing but 2 ounces of mouse pushing a spool of thread that weighed almost as much as he did. Honestly, reader, what do you think the chances are of such a small mouse succeeding in his quest? Give me a thumbs up if you think he's going to succeed. I think his odds were zip, zilch, 0, nada, goose eggs. But you must, when you're calculating the odds of a mouse's success, factor in his love for the princess. Love, as we have already discussed, is a powerful, wonderful, ridiculous thing, capable of moving mountains and spools of thread. Even with the love and purpose in his heart, Despero was very, very tired when he reached the door to the castle kitchen at midnight. His paws were shaking and his muscles were jumping, and the place where his tail should have been was throbbing. And he still had a very, very long way to go into the kitchen and down the many stairs of the dungeon, and then through, somehow, some way, through the rat-filled darkness of the dungeon itself, not knowing where he was going. And oh, reader, when he stopped to consider what lay ahead of him, Despero was filled with an icky feeling of despair. He just doesn't think he can do it. He leaned his head against the spool of thread, and he smelled celery there, and he thought of Hovis and how Hovis seemed to believe in him and his quest. So the mouse raised his head and squared his shoulders and pushed that spool of thread forward again into the kitchen, where he saw, too late, that the light was burning. Despero froze. Cook was in the kitchen. She was bent over the stove. She was stirring something. Was it a sauce? No. Was it a stew? No. What Cook was stirring was, what do you think it is? What do you think she's making? What's the one thing she's not allowed to make anymore? Soup. She was making soup, reader, in the king's own castle, against the king's law. Right under the king's very nose, Cook was making soup. As the mouse looked on, Cook put her face into the steam rising from the pot and took a deep breath. She smiled a beautiful smile, and the steam rose around her and caught the light of the candle and made a halo over her head. Despero knew how Cook felt about mice in her kitchen. He remembered quite clearly her instructions to Mig regarding himself. Kill him. The only good mouse is a dead mouse. But he had to go through Cook's kitchen to get to the dungeon door. And he had no time to waste. Soon daylight would dawn and the whole castle would be awake, and a mouse would have no chance at all of pushing a great spool of thread across the floor without attracting a great deal of attention. He would have to sneak past the mouse-hating Cook. And so, screwing his courage to a sticking place, that's a funny expression, screwing your courage to a sticking place. That means you just decide you're gonna do it. He leaned against the spool of thread and he set it rolling across the floor. Cook turned from the stove, dripping the spoon in her hand, and a frightened look came upon her face, and she shouted, "Who's there?" Come back tomorrow and find out what happens. It's a nail biter, guys. See you tomorrow. Love you.